Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Content Matters podcast. Today, I'm joined by Susan Kraft-Yorke. She's a technical writing consultant with more than 30 years experience in the tech industry. Susan spent most of her career in Palo Alto, California, and she now works from home in the Hudson Valley near New York City. Susan specializes in information architecture and developer documentation for startups, growth stage companies, and global enterprises. That's a wide span of companies. Her work focuses on diagnosing documentation breakdowns, architecting scalable publication systems, and leading large-scale documentation migrations. She helps organizations reduce time, eliminate content deadwood, and restore trust in their documentation through structured governance and measurable outcomes. Which, thank you, Susan, for joining us, because I think we're going to have a really good conversation here today.
Looking forward to it.
We're going to be talking about how to kind of take control of your technical documentation and turn it into a strategic business asset. We're going to talk about ROI. That's kind of the main conversation, but and kind of the phases of the initiatives and how you kind of figure out costs at a high level. Obviously, there's a lot to it, and we're not going to be able to go kind of heavy deep into everything, but I think we'll give you a good base to work with. And she's also going to give us kind of a test for how you can figure out your organizational readiness for IA. So that's going to be very interesting too. So welcome, Susan, and thanks everyone for joining us today.
Thank you.
I have an initial question for you, Susan. In your bio, it said that your background, you started as a geophysicist and fine arts, and that these jobs influence how you kind of approach the job that you do today. Like, can you explain that a little bit? Because that's kind of interesting.
Well, they both do, actually. So all of this ties together because it is being curious about something, right? That's art and doing research and in tech. And then you just dig into it until you find out what that makes it unique and how can you redefine it such a way that other people can understand it as well. People see things in many different ways. They consume information, concepts, images from different perspectives. So if you can bring it to them in different patterns, then they're more easily dispersed, and people can have a conversation with you about these things. So, excuse me, a fan just turned on. Is that too loud for the system?
I don't hear it. Okay, so I think we're good. Right. We're good. All right. So that's cool. So let's kind of dive right in, because I've got lots of questions for you to kind of go through. So you say that information should be tracked and managed with the same rigor as hardware or databases. But why do many organizations suffer from this idea of suspension of disbelief, that they don't really think about the time and the resources required to create professional grade documentation?
I think there's a couple of reasons why. And the primary reason today is that people are used to it. They're used to looking for things. They go, oh, it took me a little bit of time to find this, but they're not adding up all the times that they're looking. So they spend 15 minutes here, 20 minutes there, maybe 10 minutes there. At the end of the day, it's averaging 20% of your day is looking for documentation. Now, why is it like that? Why do people think it's just part of doing business? I think because everybody writes emails, everybody's like struggles with those things. Where'd I put that? They think it's just the way it is. And also, who did all the writing back in early days during the first revolution, during the Industrial Revolution? Secretaries. They were a cost center. It was a cost doing business. We have to have this, like we have to have people clean things. We have to have people give us food. It was just a matter of the background. So they haven't moved it to an asset. It's still stuck in the cost center, when information is really a very expensive asset.
Yeah, it's funny how important it is, and it has been forever, but how little thought organizations often give to keeping it organized and managed properly. And I guess they don't care if people spend hours searching for content or documentation.
I just don't think it's in the front of their mind, which is one of the reasons we're doing this. So back to my first comment, you have to present information to people in different ways because they hear things differently. They find what they're looking for. If they're not thinking about documentation or information as an asset, they'll never see it that way unless you speak to them in their language, which is why you picked up on a really important thing, the ROI. What is the return on investment of organizing your documentation? And how do you even do that? Can you do that? So they don't know. It's a complete mystery. But when people find out they're losing a lot of money just because people are looking, that's one cost. Another one is When you can't find something you needed, maybe there's an audit going on. Maybe your top client was handed the wrong document and it poisoned the relationship. So there's lots of reasons why tracking your document, making assets can help and save money.
I am really anxious to get to that part, but I have a question that's related, but not kind of directly related. And it's kind of around the idea of the role or the job of the tech writer. And I mean, they create a lot of the documentation, but they're often kind of viewed as recording it as opposed to being co-creators with the product teams or whatever teams they need to write the content. And I'm just kind of curious, like, does it matter how they're looked at, and how should they be looked at, and how do you kind of create that IA model that they're looked at differently on the documentation team?
Again, it's the growth of the business and the expansion of people's minds about how information is perceived and the people that create it. When I first started tech writing, we had our own special tool. It was very hard to learn and it was very interesting. A lot of bells and whistles. It was called FrameMaker, and engineers never used it. So we were over there doing our things in FrameMaker. Went online. FrameMaker had another piece put on top of it, which we were actually programming. Right. When the engineers saw how I put together a FrameMaker document, got it up online, so it linked around to different tools, they said, "But you're programming." Most people would not have seen that. I just happened to give a demo because it was a small company and they wanted to know how we did it. It was the first time it happened. It was early on, like 1999 maybe. So, but most engineers don't get to see that kind of a demo, that how complicated it is. Now we are using many companies are going with docs as code. So it's shifting. We're using the same tools engineers use so they can see what we do. And they actually get to review our changes because it's in the same stream. It's in the GitHub or Bitbucket or whatever you want to use. So things are changing, but why historically? And I think that's really the biggest reason that there's historically we were in a cost center, and they saw this as just a cost of doing business.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting how they think about things and how things are kind of. I think tech writers are really, I want to say, cool people, because they do really a really interesting job, and they have to really take these really complex kind of topics and make them understandable by non-technical people sometimes. So it's pretty cool.
Right.
Okay. When we get it to ROI, a part of it's going to be organizational readiness. So you have a test that you use, and it's based on Gartner's organizational levels that help you determine what the IA maturity is. Can you explain a little bit about the test?
Sure. It was something that Gartner published in 2018, and they established the current maturity level of your company based on how you handle information within the company. So first level is experimental as a startup, right? Limited resource, no on content commitment, no, the sourcing is haphazard. You put things where you find it easy to get to for then. And then a year or 2 or 3 goes by and the company is now booming. You've got 400 people instead of 40 people. And the person who wrote something at the first year, they're doing something else. They don't know where that really critical document is. It could be the entire system of the company. Like, how does information flow in and out? That could be this one document somewhere. And that's happened. I've actually had to take an old architecture document and then map out everything to make sure it still worked that way. So that was that was a very, very successful large company. We're talking millions of employees all over the world. And that's how they had their architecture for the whole system. It was this old document. They weren't sure who made it and where it even lived. Number 2 is tactical. The level 2 is tactical, small teams. Your content is sort of consistent with budget, but there's erratic results. Third one is operational. That's where the customer personas and journey maps into the content. It's polished a little bit, but there's multiple formats across many channels. I've worked at companies like that too, and they recognize that when you're at that point, they know it can be better, but they're not sure how to do it. So they ask for somebody like me to help them. The 4th level is amplified. And that's really great. Promotions are paid and earned through own channels. The delivery is predictable. People know where things are. They're planned, and the workflow is in alignment with the corporate vision, and everyone's speaking the same language. The top level, I don't know if I've ever worked at the differentiated level 5. I know they're out there. So that's where the content is recognized as an asset and a brand differentiator, right? It's an asset and a brand differentiator. So there's companies that, like maybe Coca-Cola or Kentucky Fried Chicken, their message is the same from the advertisement to inside their store, and probably behind the counter and in training. It's probably the exact same wording. You don't change it. It's all cohesive. And not that we're food people, but we all go to places like that. We know how complicated and large scale that those corporations are, yet they remain consistent. And it's because they are at that level 5 with their communication. You can't grow a company to that level and have it be that successful unless your messages are the same from the top level down to the person that walks in the door and has their first onboarding experience.
Yeah, that was kind of a question I had. Can you have a company that's a big enterprise company like a Coca-Cola or something and still be in that startup kind of phase of your information?
I've been there, and I was brought into, like I said, I won't name the company because I don't want to embarrass anyone, but it was a very large, I'll just say it's an insurance company. And they had bought many other little smaller solutions. So they had their own homegrown software, and they had all these little solutions they had tacked in. And they had this giant rat's nest of a document showing the different features they had to handle their own data inside the company. And it was massive. And no one knew who put that together. And no one knew where the original file was. So I just had this PDF. And I didn't know how old it was. And I had to go to all of those different places to find out, do you still send this information to that group over there? And it worked out. And luckily they recognized that they needed to fix something, but that's just they fixed one thing. The whole system underneath it, they'll probably get there again because they weren't looking at a systemic issue. They were looking at this one biggest problem they had. Let's fix that. So yeah, it was a problem for big, huge companies that make a lot of money.
It's kind of, yeah. Okay, so what are the main phases? Because we're getting right into the ROI now. What are the main phases of an ROI? And I assume everybody knows ROI means return on investment, but I'll just say that anyway, just in case you don't. What are the main phases of an ROI initiative for documentation?
So if I were hired to do all the phases from defining future state to discovery to analysis to repackaging to migration to testing, and then put together the Greenwood, which is evergreen philosophy of how to handle this so it stays the same, so it stays in good order. And they want the ROI. That's the full package. First, you need to be able to do all those things, because some people don't want to test, like, where are we now? How hard are we? How many people how long does it take people to find things, to document that and to get data on that? Most companies don't want to spend the money. Some might. If they do that, or if you can just estimate it, maybe you can just do a gross estimate based on educated guesses, you'll add that into the total benefits of when it's complete. Also in the total benefits could be things like, oh, you don't need that same repository anymore. Now it's going to be, maybe you're going to be in the GitHub with your engineer, so you can lose that cost. That was expensive. You don't have to have this other thing over here that's handling the way your information is being tracked and flowed. Maybe you're using SharePoint. You don't need that anymore now, because now you're doing an online static site like with MakeDocs. So you can remove those costs. So that's a cost that you don't have to pay anymore. So not only are people not spending too much time looking for something, they can find something in 10% of the time that they did before. So instead of 20 minutes, they find it in 2 minutes. So how much did that cost? Average worker, I'll say $150K a year from top to bottom. And everybody from top to bottom spends on the average 20 minutes a day. And that's average. It goes from 35 minutes down to 10 minutes a day, every day of every week of the year. That's a lot of money. So if you take 20% of 150K times however many people are looking, right? So maybe that's 30, maybe it's 100, maybe it's 1,000 people. You multiply that plus the benefits of not paying for extra tools and platforms you're not using anymore. You add those together. Those would be considered your total benefits. Then you subtract from your total investment, how much did it cost me or someone like me to refix everything, go through all those steps. Then you, what is it? Then you, so you add those up, right? Okay. Then what you want to do is find out how long it's going to take for this to, well, actually just add that up to see what your cost is for 1 year. What did you save in 1 year? Then you look at the cost of what it, how much it costs. Then you say, okay, well, that it cost me twice as much to do this as what I'm saving. Oh, okay, then I'll get my money back in 2 years. Or I'm saving so much because there were so many people depend on information they couldn't find. I'm getting my money back within 6 months because it was really out of control. We had no idea how much we were flushing down the tubes just by people searching. So it really depends on the company. And you might not change any platform. You might just change the way you're organizing things.
Yeah. So it's not necessarily get a new technology implemented.
Right.
It could be just clean up the processes, clean up the content or the documentation and stuff like that, right?
Yes. And I'm going to ask you this question. Are you going to put up a screenshot of the equation that I gave to you, the ROI?
I'm not going to put it on the screen, but what I'll do is I'll put it in the show notes for people to look at and kind of see.
But I think the concept came across. Basically, you've got resources, you've got people's time, and you've got physical resources and software resources that you could eliminate or reduce by making this change.
Yeah. So one of the things that you've said is that 30 to 40% of a typical repository consists of kind of obsolete or redundant files, what you call deadwood. Like, how does this clutter kind of evolve from just, yeah, that's just a kind of a problem. Everybody's got something on their desktop and we'll just deal with it, into a major risk for a company that could go so far as to, mess with their reputation or something like that.
Well, yeah. So if you're not strict on where you put older documents, that you're not putting them in an archive folder, or you're going to do it later, but you have an open system where people can come look, say maybe you're on Confluence, so people can come in there and see what you're working on. And here's a scenario. You've got an account manager who is being hounded by a very, very persistent client and a high-end client. And they should be. They're paying a lot of money. They're paying millions of dollars to use your product every year. So they demand top level information and right away, now. So this account manager is panicked. They go to where they know they've done this before. They've just gone and got it themselves instead of going through the tech writer or through the publication. The tech writer puts things on, just grabs it. They grabbed an old one because there was a hot fix the night before that they weren't in the loop on, because they're not part of that team. They should wait for the handoff. But because everything was open, because it's Confluence and they're part of that group, they just went, and this actually happened. And we did lose a very expensive client and they were very mad. And then everyone was mad, but it was nobody's fault because the system wasn't there, but they sure tried to point fingers. When you lose a $2 million contract, plus you're getting fees because you did something to harm them, and it's in their contract. If you harm us, you're going to pay for it. So, it's natural for people to say, whose fault is it? It's just not, they just weren't mature enough. That's all.
Yeah, but that's interesting, because if those kind of things are built into the SLAs, the service level agreements with these companies, and yet they don't have a proper documentation practice in place that exposes them to that risk. Like, it's like their two things are at odds, and it doesn't make any sense.
Well, the people writing the SLAs don't know how the back end is working. How are they doing these releases? How are they doing the release notes? They just trust that it's going to be the way it is. They don't know how it works. They're over the front end. They're doing marketing analysis. They're talking to clients. They're going to trade shows. Very different skill set, very different focus. They're just counting on the back end to be solid, because it usually is, right? Who are the most, steadfast, grounded people in companies? It's usually the engineers and the engineering groups around them, like tech writers. Yeah.
Okay. Something else that you said was, or that part of your equations is that documentation teams can translate kind of, or that wasted search time can cost a mid-sized division kind of up to $500,000 a year. So how do you kind of So you can figure that out, but how do you put it into kind of words that the CFO understands and can kind of wrap their heads around?
Again, you just go back to the how much time you can use your own time. It's like, it's really bothering me. It's taking me so much time to find things. I'm going to keep track of how long it takes, right? Some people do that. I did an analysis of verbal. I did interviews with 22 people in one company, all manager and up to C-level, and asked them. It's like, you're trying to do something in documentation, but you can't because, and you know why. And in a perfect world, what would you want? And so usually they went back to a previous larger, more stable company. I want it like this. This is a startup, but it was a fast growing startup. So they were doubling and tripling in number of people in the company, and their clients were equally, right, tripling and quadrupling clients. So things were moving very fast, and they just hadn't had a time to, and they just didn't know better. Because when you start up a company, you've got a technical idea, and you've got funders, you get the venture capitalists, and they know what the market needs. The capitalists assume that the people starting the company know how to put all their teams together, except it's just not the case. So that's one reason why I'm out there right now. I'm trying to get this out there. I'm really nervous about AI is going to make some small companies that deserve better just be buried under the weight of their own documentation, because they're going to be pumping out white papers and all sorts of things, and they won't know where to do with them.
Yeah. One of the things you said, like the 20% loss of work time, for trying to find searches and stuff. I've heard, I don't know if I've heard that exact number, but I've worked for software companies over the years that do document management systems and records management and stuff. And they talk about rot and how to, wasting time finding documentation. And that's like a pretty standard number that I've kind of seen. And I can't figure out why it's so consistent over so many years. And yet we aren't doing anything about it. And then but then AI shows up. And it's like, oh crap, it's a mess.
This is the tipping point year. I really do think it's, the hockey stick curve, or the tipping point. It's an exponential growth, and that's where we are. We're about to go into rocket speed. The reason why it's 20% is because an average, and these back in 1999 was the first paper I ever read about this. It was by Susan, I can't remember her last name. She's my first name, so I remember that part. She's retired now, but she wrote a paper and published it in IDC, I think, in 99. And she talked about knowledge workers. And she got funding to do research across all the different industries. And it took her quite a long time to get all this information, because she had to do it by hand. There was no AI, right? We barely had our computer systems up, our web systems up. So that was the first one. She did another one maybe 2-3 years later. And then we started having more and more papers written about this same issue, and it was always the same. So there's 3 canonical papers. Hers was the first one that was based on doing research analysis broadly across different systems that came up with the same numbers, and it hasn't changed. And I'm afraid it's going to get worse, like you just said. So it's really, that's why we all say 20%. And it's across medical, it's across tech, it's across food services, it's across communications, it's across hardware, building, anything.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting. I just found that when I read that number, I thought I've heard this very similar number like 10 years ago. It's just it's not changing. Like, what's going on? Okay. So if a proper IA investment can double its value within 3 years, that's something that you've said. What are the primary drivers of that return?
It's the same. We're looking at the same question from different angles. And it's, again, you can reduce the software and the documentation repos that you were using, because now you can consolidate them to maybe what engineers are using. You're simplifying your system. You're getting rid of speed bumps. You're putting guardrails in place. Yeah, you're getting rid of the deadwood that are just kind of clogging the system up. You've got naming conventions. You're making things that make more sense, really. Engineers have done that forever. You've got naming conventions for your variables, for your elements, for your even your images. They have all the same right? But people don't often do that with documentation anymore. They used to before the web. Back when I said where I was using FrameMaker, we would print things out, and that's what we would send to our clients, and they would use it for training. And those documents would go to a document control center. They were magical. We have no idea how they handled stuff. They were putting numbers on everything. Bill of materials called BOMs, documentation, blueprints, hardware, chip design. They all have these document control numbers. When documentation went online and wikis came out and everybody was writing, that went out the window. I mean, you're not going to have an engineer say, "Oh, I'm going to go put this into the document control and wait till it comes back with a number." No, we're moving too fast. We couldn't use that anymore. But we lost a really important function, which was to systemically keep things organized so we can find them.
When you do the cost savings part of the ROI equation, obviously search time improves and things like that. But can you also build in things like reduced support calls?
Oh, yes.
Faster client onboarding and stuff like you can build all that into your model too.
Thank you. Yes, you brought up something that I neglected to say earlier. In the total benefits, your cost center calls go down because people are onboarded more easily. They know what's happening. They can follow the logic through your systems. Your own people, maybe you got sales or marketing has a bunch of internal software products created by a team inside internal group inside the division. I've had companies, they wanted me to organize things because the marketing and sales people were calling engineers directly. Where is that software program again? How do I use that software program again? You know, and then they were taking their time. Like, well, I'm going to videotape this. They put it up on YouTube. They made it hidden, but it was still on YouTube. A company about how to use their software, internal software. So those kind of workaround solutions, because people are trying to do better. They want to save time. They want to help somebody understand where things are, but it's taking a lot of time, and repeat over and over again is just frustrating, and it kind of dissolves morale too.
Yeah. What about, do you think acquisition costs could be part of it too? Because a lot of the research people do now for buying software is online. They don't talk to salespeople. They go to they go to ChatGPT and that stuff. But then they go to your website and they're looking at your publicly available technical documentation that's nice and organized, hopefully, and structured, and it helps them make a decision faster. Yes. I'm just wondering if maybe there's a way you could build that into your ROI model as well.
That's a really good question. I'm going to have to think about that. You know, I'm going to add that to the next paper I write on that. Thank you. I'll research that. But it makes sense because, again, you want to have everyone use the same language and the same message from the top level to the people walking in the door to people putting documentation out on the glass. You want it to all read the same way. Make it look like it belongs to the same doc set. So another thing that happens is you've got different people writing with different terms and different styles, and they might use different headers. Yeah. And your customers are reading, is this even the same company? Because you know, you get lost in something when you get really technical and you go, oh, wow, it's really cool. And you go down that rabbit hole and you go, wait a minute, who am I reading? Who is this? If it's not branded by even the way you talk or your font style or the colors, it's a problem, right?
Do you think that AI is going to change the way you do an ROI model? Or do you think there's impacts to it?
Well, that's a very good question. And I use AI all the time. I just wrote a paper and published an article on how to build a containment system, because I don't think people really most people understand how to use these things yet, because they're saying, okay, it's more structured than Google, but it's way more structured. It's like, in fact, one of the things I did with AI, I said, okay, I view working with you as like I'm talking straight to a compiler. So I organize my thoughts ahead of time like I'm writing a program in pseudocode. And then I heard someone the other day say, oh, it's like ordering a restaurant meal because it's the same ingredients, same chef, but it's always a little bit different each time. Oh, which one is it? Sure. So I actually had a discussion with ChatGPT, and if it, and it told me why, it's so blunt. Like, well, this is why that doesn't work. That's why this doesn't work. But it gave me a basis to have a conversation and write an article and create a video on this. And really there's 6 things you need to ask. And it's like, what's your role? What's your task? Where are you getting information to use? Where you don't get information, don't spread yourself too far out. Don't blur the line between these different categories, things like that. So once people get used to treating it more like it's a programmable feature rather than just answer this question for me, I think it's going to make it's going to make a huge amount of difference. And I think that the C-suite people, they can do their own investigation. They go, oh, I heard this person talking, like they might have heard this video or a piece of it. Go, I don't believe that. And then they ask, they go, oh, well, what do you know? And then they might even see the documentation's been going back to 1999 saying you're losing money and you don't even see it. Yeah. So I think so.
Yeah.
Long answer to say yes.
Big impact.
Yeah.
Okay. For an organization to kind of get ready to take control, best place to start is an audit and a pilot. And those are not hugely expensive, but they're not cheap either. Like what do you think, why do you think someone should start there? And are there things that kind of come up that surprise the stakeholders that really kind of shock them into going to that next step?
Well, I've never been at the point where they've made that decision, because I've been at companies where it was clearly they needed to have some organization because there was some of those problems were happening multiple times. And I said, look, we need to just stop and look where all the documentation is. Let's do an audit. And they said, no, we can't. We don't have time. And they continued making these very costly mistakes, and they just didn't see, they weren't connecting the dots. There's another company I worked for, also, and this one was a more mature company. They knew they needed to do something. They didn't know what it was. So they had a conversation with me for 4 months. And I introduced the idea that maybe what you're looking for is information architecture, because they didn't know the word. They just know they needed to fix it. And they were looking for somebody who could give them a solution. So the first part of the conversation in the first part of the 4 months was, just tell me what they did and what the problems they had and what they thought they needed to do. And I said, oh, okay, yeah, sure, I understand. Then after a little while, I brought the information architecture, but the final conversation, it was all about information architecture. They had bought it full on. And I wasn't trying to sell them that. I was just trying to help them and give them that solution, and they knew it. And then that was it. It was really good. So it was a great, great project. And they had the entire team involved. They all knew they had to spend up to 20% of their time working with me, and giving me information, because they had documentation everywhere. Yeah.
So I guess what that kind of lets you know then is an organization's organizational readiness for information architecture really affects where they are on that kind of what stage they're at, really affects their ability to kind of prove the ROI of doing this kind of project.
Yes, I agree with that.
Yeah. So, okay. So let's talk 90-day milestone. If a company started today, you say that measurable savings are usually visible within the first 90 days of a pilot. What's the very first kind of win that a team should look for to prove they're on the right track?
I would go with the onboarding material, like the hello world page and the onboarding material, because those are the people that are going to give you the feedback right away. Like, this is great, or I'm confused. You'll have fewer expert support calls as people are onboarding when they go through that first. And that is what happens. People feel comfortable. They understand where they are. There's less questions. Once somebody doesn't trust a documentation set, they don't trust anything. They're always questioning. So they don't even trust their own inner guidance, because they're so unsure about what to do and they don't want to make a mistake. So they just stop and ask questions, and they take another step to ask questions. But once they start going through smoothly, they build confidence. They know what they can do. They'll actually explore a little bit more on their own. And it's actually a really easy win to do that.
Is there a point where the CFO is there like a baseline where the CFO will jump in and go, yeah, I get it, and let's invest. Let's do this.
Oh, that would be nice. It would be more like the CIO. So the CFO needs to have that, especially if it's large scale. The CFO has to be in agreement, of course, or at least the business center accountant person who's taking care of that business center. They have to be in agreement, and they're watching. They're definitely watching. So there are ways to make a dashboard. So somebody like a CIO or CFO can watch the improvements real time. So that's a little bit more. I actually have not put that in any of the documents that you've seen. That's kind of behind the scenes because I want to do a test on it first, but I know that can happen. Yeah. I know other information architects have done that. So that would be a really large scale and a really juicy project to work on, to build one of those as well.
Yeah, that would be very interesting to kind of look at, and super important, because you need to show them not just at the end of a project, but kind of as you move through it, how things are working, so they kind of get invested in it the whole way along.
I think it would be just like you check your credit rating, right? You know, those Credit Karma things come up. You can keep that in place so you can check to make sure people are indeed keeping the evergreen protocol going forward, because it's really easy to slip back into your old sloppy methods.
Yeah. So is a documentation initiative, it's not a one-time thing, right? You don't just come in, put a new process in place, walk away, and say you're good for the rest of your life.
Only if they keep that process going. And they might change it too. So, you know, what I had read before, it was like maybe 5 years ago, this was the library industry's biggest problem, was what we're talking about right now, because of the wikis, basically. And after reading dozens of their papers, they all said at the end, you have to have a human keeping track. You cannot automate this, because there's always a way for people to find a way around. They always find the quick way around. And just because, just this one time, it'll be okay. Except everyone's doing it. So everyone's just doing it this one time, and it's always being done that way, which means that you're losing traction and you're starting to get a big mess again, and you're starting to devolve. So I guess the bottom line would, even if there is a fancy dashboard for the C-level suites to see what's going on, and the account managers or whoever, you still need to have a real person that tracks and knocks on people's doors, like, hey, I noticed you get a message to update your document. At least let us know that it's still good and you haven't responded. So you need to have a real person in the end. Yeah.
Adoption and change management.
Yes.
Are usually the last things companies think about, and it should be the very first thing on their list.
Yeah. I mean, back when I was back in the old days, back when FrameMaker, I used to tell them, I was like, if you don't plan enough at the beginning, if you don't spend an extra 5%, you're just kicking it down the road, and your support costs are gonna multiply. We've been saying this forever, and I think it's just short-term results are what people go for, because they want this month, this quarter, this budget to come in or under. And if you expand it out just a little bit, because the future is going to be better, doesn't help their bonus next month, right? So that's the problem, is the quick time results versus long-term results. Yeah.
Super important. This has been a really good conversation, Susan. I know we didn't kind of walk through the exact ROI equation, but I will put it up on the show notes for the podcast for people to look at afterwards, if that's okay with you, and also point them to your website, where you have a nice ROI example document that they can look at too, and kind of get more reach out to you and get more information on all that kind of stuff. So I do appreciate you being with me today. It's been really interesting.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you for the invitation. I enjoyed it very much too. You've got some really good questions, Barb. I appreciate talking to you. I appreciate talking with you.
Yeah, great. Thanks. And thank you to Ingenix and Discover CX, who are the sponsors of the Content Matters podcast. They're actually the same company. They have different divisions for products. Ingenix helps companies make content easier to create, manage, and deliver, so customers can find the answers they need. Discover CX is a platform built for teams that need to deliver customer portals, help documentation, and customer success sites. Write once, reuse everywhere, pull content from different sources. So you have one place where you can curate it and then publish it out to all the different channels. We kind of talked about that. It has built-in XML authoring, AI, customer portal, and headless delivery. everything you need to keep your content clear, consistent, and easy to find. A modern way to deliver a customer experience. You can go to ingenix.com to learn more about Ingenix, which is more web content management, or you can go to discovercx.com, which is more of the customer documentation, technical documentation, customer portal software. And don't forget to sign up for the newsletter on ingenix.com or on our LinkedIn company page, because we will let you know of upcoming podcasts and share lots of great resources and information from all the wonderful guests that we have. And with that, I'm going to close it out. So thank you everyone for watching, and thanks, Susan. I appreciate it.